lots of clothes. You can see made in Bangladesh everywhere in Zara, H&M. So that garments industry is one of the biggest industries there. So before I start my presentation, since Professor Akari introduced the organization that I work for, which is BRAC, let me just share a little bit what I do in BRAC. So BRAC is one of the largest Southern development organization. It has been originated. It was formed in Bangladesh in 1972. Bangladesh got independent in 1971, and BRAC started as a relief organization initially, relief and rehabilitation for a newly independent country. In 1972, it started its journey, and it was basically a project or a dream of one person, which is the founder of BRAC, Fazli Hassan Abed. And later, in Bangladesh has been independent. It's been 51 years, and BRAC is 50 years old now. And now BRAC works in 11 countries, 6 in Africa, 4 in Asia, and it is one of the largest, as I've mentioned. What I do in BRAC is I oversee the early childhood development portfolio in BRAC International. And so BRAC also has a university in Bangladesh, which is one of the top private university in Bangladesh, BRAC University. I also did my master's in early childhood development from there. And many students from around the world, from Africa, from many countries in Africa, and also from Asia, from Afghanistan, and other countries, they go for their studies in BRAC University in Bangladesh. And it heavily focuses on all the social development related courses, subjects, and heavily focuses on SDG. So anyway, so I am going to talk a little bit about investing in early childhood care and education in the global south. We all know what global south means. It is basically the low-income countries, the southern countries, which are the countries which are at the south of the northern developed countries. I work apart from Bangladesh, I have projects in Uganda, Tanzania, Sierra Leone, Liberia, South Sudan, and we have our regional office in Kenya. And in Asia, we work in Afghanistan, Philippines. We used to be in Pakistan and Nepal as well, and Myanmar. So I have just pulled some examples from the countries where I work, Bangladesh, Uganda, Tanzania, and Liberia. So that is, by meaning global south, I don't mean all the countries. I'll just give some examples from some countries where I work. And the early childhood care and education, it involves it's basically the age group. It's conception to birth to age 8. It covers this entire age group. So, and that's why it's a very complex kind of, I would say complex kind of, from a development language, I would say programmatic area, because since it covers the age group and not only poverty, not only education, not only health, it's a comprehensive kind of very complex programmatic area, the early childhood care and education. It includes maternal health, it includes child health, it includes nutrition, it includes learning, it includes education, everything. So where is early childhood care and education in the global space? Let's first talk about that. So this is the UN Conventions on the Rights of the Child, the UNCRC, which has given all the rights that a child should have in the world. And it talks about the right to learn and the right to go to school. It talks about protection. It talks about the right of the child of being cared. So all of these are actually part of early childhood care and education. So it has already been there. Many countries have signed the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the UNCRC, and the southern countries are also there, the countries that which I will give the example from. We have the SDG, and the SDG, for MDG we had a very specific goal for education, but not for early learning or early childhood education, early childhood development. But for SDG we have the SDG 4.2, which is the equal access to quality pre-primary education. So it very much specifies the emphasis on early childhood education. It also talks about inclusive education. It talks about qualified teachers in the developing country. SDG 3 talks about health and well-being, nutrition. So it's very much there in the SDG. So it's a global priority. We also have the global framework. This is called the Nurture and Care Framework, which is launched by WHO, UNICEF, World Bank, RNEC, and a few other organizations together in 2018, launched the global framework for early childhood care and education, which is the Nurture and Care Framework. It talks about adequate nutrition, good health, responsive caregiving. So parenting is also an integral part of early childhood development. It talks about opportunities for early learning. It talks about children's safety and security. So this is a global framework. All the international organizations launched it together so that countries can adapt it and implement it. So early childhood care and education is globally very important because we can see that all the global framework and all the global targets are there. Why invest in early childhood care and education? So we have the Heckman's theory, which says that it has the highest rate of return to investment. So we know that we always understand anything better when when we see some sort of economic return. So that's why Heckman's theory is very important, because it shows that economic return of investing in early childhood. And it also, we have many research around the world which has proved that the highest rate of return comes when we invest on the most disadvantaged children, when we invest on the poorest children. This early years is also very important because of the rapid brain development. Up to age 0 to age 5, 95% of brain structure develops. So that's why it's also another reason why we should invest in early childhood development. And it ensures that children are starting primary school on time. It is a big problem in Global South that there's a lot of overage, underage, mostly overage children in the primary school. So, and that also causes the high dropout as well. So it ensures that children begin primary school on time so that they are less likely to drop out. It reduces repetition and essential childcare support to working parents. This is also a reality. It used to be usually in the developed countries, the services, we see that it's very much available, but in the developing and underdeveloped countries, the services are not there. And early childhood care and education services are essentially, now that women are more in the income generating activities and more in the economic sector, it's an essential service for the working parents. So these are all of the reasons why we need to invest in early childhood care and education. But what is the current status? These are some global findings. UNICEF estimates that at the current rate of progress, more than half of low and lower middle income countries will not achieve universal pre-primary education by 2030. And of course, the low and lower middle income countries are mostly the southern, the global south that I'm talking about. Despite a growing evidence base, global consensus on the importance of early childhood education, it remains under-resourced and comparatively neglected as a policy issue. And I will reflect when I will talk about each of the countries. You will be able to see how true this is, that it is still not a policy priority in each of the individual countries. while many governments have set ambitious goals for scaling early learning programs in line with these global norms. So since all these global norms, frameworks, targets are there, many countries have set ambitious goals in the global south, but uneven implementation, insufficient investment are persistent challenges. In low-income countries, governments allocate only about 3% of their education budget to early childhood education, compared to 9% in the high-income countries. Even these 3%, it varies. In some countries, it's 0%. In some countries, it's 2 to 3. So that's the reality. This is the current status of investment in early childhood care and education. So now, this is I've just took some statistics from the World Bank statistics site, which shows the investment in terms of percentage of GDP in education. I tried to find out what is there for early childhood education, but I found out that, well, the allocation for education in Bangladesh, it's 1.83% of the total GDP, but there is no specific line for early childhood education. Same with Uganda, same with Tanzania, same with Liberia. So there is no specific separate budget line for early childhood education. It's the overall education budget. Maybe, so the public information is not available, maybe in terms of each of the countries' 5-year plan, 8-year plan, or financial documents, they may have those specific allocations, but the public information is not available in terms of how much or what percentage of education budget is invested in early childhood education. The international support and influence in each of these countries, since the global goals are there, mostly this early childhood care and education agenda is driven by the international organizations like UNICEF, GPE, FCDO, USAID, World Bank. In West Africa, the Open Society Foundation is also very active. So the early childhood care and education is still a global agenda more than a local agenda. It's still very much driven by the donors and by the international community. Policy and framework. So if we look at, in each of these countries in the global south, in Bangladesh, they have a policy which has been approved in 2013, which is the comprehensive ACCT policy. In Uganda, Uganda also has a policy in place which has been approved in 2016. In Tanzania, the policy is being drafted. The policy is not there yet. Liberia launched a policy in 2012, but it's quite dated now. Now they are working on, updating it or working on something new. And so in these countries, first of all, they don't have a budget line specified for early childhood care and education. And also they don't have, Bangladesh and Uganda very recently have launched the policy. In most of the countries, there is no policy in place. And without a policy,